Welcome to the Fantasy NASCAR podcast brought to you by RaceForThePrize.com. We're headed west to wine country. Xfinity Series Saturday night race, 8 p.m. How exciting is that? Let's do things a little bit different on today's podcast because last week we talked about road course racing at Portland and we don't want to just repeat what was said. You might hear that somewhere else, but not here. But what you will hear here is RaceForThePrize.com. That's where you can go to get access to this beautiful fantasy NASCAR spreadsheet that has all the road course race information you could possibly ever dream of or imagine. Get it, $26 for the month of June, $52 if you just want to pay once for June and July. How you do it? PayPal, Venmo, Cash App it over. One-time payment, no subscriptions, no credit cards, no proof of identification, no retina scans. Boom, you're in. No recurring billing either. God, they always get you with those. Anyway, Sonoma. How are we going to approach this? It's a road course. Be careful with last year's Sonoma data because there weren't stage breaks, so there's your warning there. We will have them this year with the stage cycling, and you should be well versed in how that plays out and how we can see some drivers that we wouldn't expect slide through, but for the most part, the results in the road courses are pretty much correlated with speeds in practice and who is good. There will be some surprises, and those surprises will be because of not surprises. What do you mean? The surprises will be because of not surprises. When I say something that's not surprising about the Xfinity Series and road course racing is that they're lunatics. Now, Sonoma isn't as challenging. We don't have as much data because they've only run here twice. Sonoma's not as wacky as last week at Portland. As I warned you all week, Portland Turn 1 is stupid. And maybe it's not stupid, but the drivers are equally stupid. And if you watched that race, you saw, yeah, this is dumb. We've seen that at the Roval in the past. We've seen that at Indy in the past. If you make the course too challenging or artificially difficult, especially in a stock car, bad things happen, and we've seen that. And really, Xfinity Series drivers don't really need an excuse to be aggressive or stupid. And aside from turn one, as we all know, in the Xfinity Series, they're spinning out constantly. They're wrecking each other constantly. I mean, remember last week when I mentioned Jesse Awuji wrecking Ty Gibbs under caution? That is all you need to know. Caution. Awuji flying into Gibbs. What are we doing? I expect Sonoma to not be as wacky, but when I say unsurprising, leading to surprising results that shouldn't be surprising, is that we see good drivers spin out and go from second to 10th in the last lap. We see guys have quality days who just get a little too aggressive or just a little too stupid and make a bonehead move. Happens every time. I mean, you look at the Xfinity Series race at Coda. Kyle Larson out of nowhere wins that race this year. And SVG just bombing it. Kyle Larson had no chance in that race. Had a terrible day. Gets up close to the front at the end. Even on that final run, on the final lap, going into like the final turn, it's like, he's way too far. Okay, I guess he's not too far behind after all. It's Xfinity Series road course racing, so everything can possibly happen. Now, how I want to approach this podcast today is to look at the archetypes, optimal archetypes, grouping drivers into categories. Now we have the drivers on the screen sorted by their top 10 percentage rate, and you can see what they have done over the last year, and no one's going to argue with any of this. Maybe you're surprised. Parker Kligerman's been that good. Yeah, Parker Kligerman's been that good. If we look at his top 10 percentage, 71% of his races, 14, so it's a decent sample size. It's got top 10 percentage. So here you can see top 10 percentage rates. You want to look at top 5, you want to look at wins. All of that is in the fantasy NASCAR spreadsheet at racefortheprize.com. Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. That's two times. I'm not quite at 16 yet. AJ, Custer, Kligerman, Mayer, Allgaier, Gibbs. Okay, so there's no surprises up here. Now, among these drivers, what we first want to do is start breaking them into categories. And we'll start with the dominators category. And yes, I will use the term dominators because these are dominant cars with dominant drivers. They aren't simply just hogs running meaningless fast laps or laps led. They're out there executing on every different turn, on throttle, off throttle, blocking, making passes when they need to get up, getting in and off pit road correctly. They are true dominators. And among those, and we'll look at this field, it's going to be AJ. Although Shane Van Gisbergen doesn't have a high top 10 rate, he did just win at Portland. Now that win wasn't the cleanest win. His car wasn't the cleanest. It was banged up, but a lot can be said of that. You could on one hand say, oh, that was an ugly win. Or you can say, man, he won with an ugly race car, a beaten up race car, in a race that was pretty much a street fight. And he came out and pulled it off. And he hasn't really been around that long. He won that first race, and we just assumed, oh, he's a veteran. Well, there should be some growing pains. He hasn't been in very many races. If he had not won at Chicago, erase that from your mind. Men in Black, memory scam. He didn't win at Chicago. Let's imagine he just had a decent race. And so he came into Portland. He's never won a Cup Series road course race. He's been in a couple. He's been in a couple Xfinity races. He wins at Portland. What is your perspective on SVG? Think about that. If he had not won at Chicago and he won last week, what would the sentiment be? We'd be riding high. We'd be pretty excited about him. But because he had won that first race and then he wins an ugly one in Portland, well, let me break it to you, folks. They're all ugly in the Xfinity Series. Very rarely are they beautiful Formula One type prestigious racing around billion-dollar yachts in Monte Carlo. No. They're all ugly. I mean, even last year Sonoma, where Kyle Larson stunk up the show, led every lap, and then we get a caution at the very end, he loses. They all end up ugly in the end. So, however you feel about Portland, I'm classifying Shane Van Gisbergen, SVG, into that dominator category. When I head into the Sonoma race, and I'm looking for drivers that can lead laps and win, I'm targeting a Collin car in SVG. And the other Collin car in AJ Allmendinger. Who else will we put in this category? Allgaier slides in. It's hard to put him in a crowded field like this. When we have softer fields, he absolutely is a dominator. And we witnessed that last week at Portland. Although Portland wasn't the softest because we did get AJ. We did get SVG. I'm mainly talking about when we get some real Cup Series talent stepping down and running some races. Then Allgaier still tries to be a dominator, but he cannot dominate. And he is in this category, but I don't think he has a very good opportunity with SVG, AJ, Ty G. Probably not going to work out for him in this field. But all in all, when I look at drivers that can lead laps and win the race, although he never seems to win races, not very many road course wins for Allgaier, he is in that category. Softer fields, absolutely. Same can be said of Cole Custer. Softer fields, absolutely. But in this case, I'm more than willing to bump him down now. I'll leave Allgaier in the fringe as a driver who can dominate. Although he probably won't qualify well, and then that will pretty much tell me he can't get there. He can get some points, and he might be a good fantasy play, but he's not going to lead laps without starting position. Custer, same category, but I'm more quick and reticent to drop him down and say he's not going to lead over AJ. He is not going to lead over Gibbs or SVG. Gibbs, yes. Plenty of road course wins in the Xfinity Series. As a part-timer in 2021, as a full-timer in 2022, and then as a part-timer again in 2023. This year, 24th of Coda. Coda was Coda. You know how that race went down. A bunch of goofy stuff happening throughout with penalties and cutting courses and wrecking each other. But if you look at Ty Gibbs in the next gen car. Last year, he closed out with 2 top 5 finishes, opened up with, I believe, a podium at COTA in the Cup Series. So he's knocking on the door there. He's going to have a fast hot rod. He may be the guy that goes out and leads a bunch of laps. AJ, Ty, SVG, those are your dominators. And I suppose you're going to have to throw John Hunter Nemechek in there as well, race from the back to the front at COTA. It's a Joe Gibbs car. Nemechek isn't really a world-class road course racer. He did finish, second in Chicago last year, top 10s at the end. He's pretty much in that Allgaier territory. And the only reason that I won't completely drop him down like a Custer is because he's going to be much more of a driver absolutely going for the win. More aggressive, and that aggression can lead to wins. And that aggression can lead to him getting out front and leading some laps, maybe through strategy. Whereas Custer and the team, now whether they approach it this way going into the race, they could absolutely change their game plan during the race if they witness, like, hey, I don't think we can beat Allmendinger today. Or, hey, I don't think we've got anything for SVG. You could see Custer sliding into a different category and playing it much safer. So those are our dominators. AJ, Ty, Allgaier are very fringy. SVG, Nemechek a little less fringy than Allgaier. I really would not want to play Gator or Finding Nemo either. Our next category are the challengers. And this might be a better place for JHN, but there are definitely a couple that really fit this mold. And again, the strength of the field kind of adjusts this. This isn't the strongest field. It's not a soft field either. But the challengers, when we talk about these drivers, we're talking about a Sheldon Creed, talking about a Parker Kligerman, we're talking about an Austin Hill. These are the drivers who can win, and they can lead laps. Although as the field gets tougher, those percentages and probabilities shrink. They're much less likely to lead laps, much less likely to win the race. But more importantly, they will wreck. More importantly, they will spin. Because these guys are just too aggressive. They're not quite dominators out front crushing it. But they're battling each other for top 5 finishes. And like, well, maybe if I get in a spot, I can win this thing. So I got to stay in this game. I got to stay close to the front. And they're all too aggressive. And you have seen this time and time again, especially with Sheldon Creed, always getting into some situation. You can put Chandler Smith in that category too, who, although I will argue is probably more in the next category, sometimes he does believe that he is a challenger, maybe a little too aggressive and getting up there and fighting and makes mistakes. Austin Hill, he's not playing it safe anymore. He wants one of these wins. He's got a lot of top 5s, a lot of top 10s. He's ready to win an Xfinity road course race. He's got a truck race win. He wants one. So he's out there, aggressive, fighting, and running a little too hard in the corner. A little too hot. And so they are very dangerous in DFS because they're going to make mistakes. They're going to mess up. And so the initial assumption is maybe I should fade these guys because they are too aggressive. The problem is there's a handful of challengers. There's a handful of these drivers that not quite dominators, but can really get away with the podium. And you can throw Allgaier in that category if you want this week. Sam Mayer is going to be in that category. Kligerman is going to be in that category this week. Cole Custer is going to be in that category. Although some of them might play a little safer than others, they still all have in the back of their minds, like, hey, I can win this thing. I just got to stay in the top 5. The only way I'm going to stay in the top 5 is I got to battle. And so they drive a little too hard. And so, again, the assumption is, well, I don't want to play these guys. They're going to screw up too many times. Well, sometimes they can screw up and still get a good finish. I mean, Cole Custer misses turn 1 at Portland in 2022, still goes on to win the freaking race. Soft field, though. But there's plenty of opportunities. And the problem is that even if you do want to fade these type of drivers, these challengers, there's a handful of them. Right? There's Custer, there's Kligerman, there's Mayer. I'll put Allgaier in there. It's Austin Hill. There is Chandler Smith, Sheldon Creed. On a given week, we might see Riley Herbst there. On a given week, we might see Chandler Smith there. There's too many of them to fade them all. One of them will slide through. One of them will make fewer mistakes. Or one will be less penalized for their mistake, or their mistake will be harmless or innocuous, and they slide through. So you can't completely avoid these guys. And although they don't score a lot of points and they're not great point per dollar plays, I mean, often the same can be said of the dominators. You go back and look at Portland last week. Sammy Smith scores 47 fantasy points. Not huge. And I would argue probably was more of a challenger last week in that softer field than he was for the next category we'll talk about. But either way, 47 fantasy points. It's not a lot, but it's not very far behind the two dominators in Allgaier and SVG. There's just not a lot of points on the board. And his point per dollar play is actually better than SVG at 5.6 versus 5.4. Yeah, they don't score a lot of points, but no one scores a lot of points. There just aren't a lot of points on the board. And unless the thing turns into a wreck fest and we see, these wacky plays from the back come to the front, sure, that can happen. I don't expect it to happen at Sonoma, but it can happen at a road course. And if it does, then yes, the challengers are off the board. If it is a wreck fest and a Roval monsoon and we get punts from the 30s getting top 10s, then sure, I get it. But if it's a regular road course race in the Xfinity Series, whatever that means, we traditionally don't get a lot of fantasy points. We don't traditionally get a lot of great point per dollar plays. And so these guys, just based on their finishing position and their minimal place differential and their raw points, get in there. I mean, look at AJ. 47 fantasy points. Finished fourth. And that is a top 6 score. Just not a lot of points. Got 40 points here, 6 place differential here, 2 fast laps, 4.4x, not very good, but there's just not a lot of points available. And so we can see challengers that really don't light up the scoreboard. And that's one of the things you got to train your brain to think about before you go into this race and you're building. You want a bunch of points, and you're going to project Sammy Smith starting 9th. Maybe you got him finishing 5th. Like, man, that's not a lot of points. But you really don't need that big of a score from a challenger because no one else scores. No one in the bottom tier to the mid-pack really puts on a bunch of points. Now, sometimes we can see a circumstance or a situation where that can occur, and we'll know. But if you don't really see a just standout guy that you think is going to get you 20 place differential points in a top finish, then these 47s, these conservative approaches, just surviving, grabbing a podium, again, it's not that far separated from the dominators. There's not a lot of points on the board. They work raw-wise. I mean, look at Cole Custer. Disappointing day, finished 6th. Maybe he finishes 4th. That would drop him up to about a top 10 DFS score. Nothing special, nothing exciting. Ho-hum. But almost a viable fantasy NASCAR play. Not far away. And so you go into this week with the same thing with Cole Custer saying, man, Cole Custer's not going to score enough fantasy points. Why not? Why not? We could easily see SVG, Ty Gibbs, and the like splitting up the dominator points even more so than already happens. We could see AJ leading a bit and SVG leading a bit. And so they really don't separate from the rest of the field. And then we see no one in the back really shoot up to the front and have a miraculous day. None of the mid-pack really score that many fantasy points. So then it's about these challengers who just doesn't make a mistake and has a decent day, finishes in the top 5. Easily could be Cole Custer. And at the end, like, man, he only scored 47 fantasy points. Well, that's all he needed because no one else scored any fantasy points. And the guys at the top really didn't have breakthrough days. So you'd love to avoid these challengers because they will wreck. But one of them's going to slide through. They're not going to score a lot of fantasy points, but they're going to work. Our next category are the finishers. We love these guys when we can identify these guys. Usually, and it's a lot circumstantial, situational. They are good drivers. They are in good equipment. But most of all, they're happy for a top 10. And they're less aggressive than the challengers. They're not doing stupid bonehead stuff. This can change from week to week. The easiest thing is who is not. A Sheldon Creed is not a finisher. He's a challenger. He's doing dumb stuff. We want the opposite of that. Austin Hill, at one point in time, may have been a finisher. He is not no mo. He wants to win. He'll lay it on the line. Let's do the easy to understand one. Jesse Love was optimal at Coda. Why? First road course race. I'll be happy for a top 10. I just want to keep this thing clean. And so when we can get a very good read on who's going to be a finisher, who's going to be satisfied to not do stupid stuff, keep his car clean, and the price works, and we can get him around that 45 fantasy point mark, 43 fantasy point mark, if the price is correct, then we love that play. Unfortunately, it's not as always easy to understand who the finishers will be. Sometimes, given a harder field, we could see someone from the challenger category step down and be happy to finish the race. Stacked races, the ones with more dominators and good fields, still, most challengers don't change their ways. Creed ain't changing his ways. Hill ain't changing his ways. Allgaier isn't changing his approach. They still think that they are dominators. They still think they're challengers. They still think they can win the race. More often than not, stacked fields, we don't see a lot of guys step down from challenger to finisher. Just the way it is. Now, one guy we could see reevaluate a situation would be a Parker Kligerman, who we put as a challenger initially. Parker Kligerman could say, well, I can't win this race. I'll be satisfied for a top 10. And I would expect that at Sonoma, him to be more of a finisher. I could see, no, Sam Mayer's not changing. Although he should in this field, because of all those wins last year against softer fields, he will not. Who else do we got? Sammy Smith should, and I would probably expect him to be more of a finisher this week. He's a late model short track racer. This is not his cup of tea. Just wants to get some points, be safe. I could very well see him doing that. Chandler Smith probably should, with JGR having Sheldon Creed out there wrecking like a maniac anyway. And then you've got John Nemechek and Joe Gibbs, Ty Gibbs in the car. Chandler should more than likely slide down, but I wouldn't guarantee that. But I could easily see these guys playing it much more safer. And again, if we're talking about drivers that are less likely to wreck and spin than some of the challengers, then maybe that's where you go with your money. Riley Herbst, given the way that his season's going, not the greatest, I very well could see him saying, I just need a solid day today. I'm not going to beat SVG. I'm not going to beat AJ. I'm not going to beat Ty G. I just need to have a solid day, keep it clean, go out here and run some laps. That is our third category. Those are the finishers. Now, on some days, Herbst, when we soften the field, I mean, you get this really super soft Mid-Ohio fields. We don't get those anymore because they're not at Mid-Ohio. Although, this week at Mid-Ohio, we got Mazda MX-5 Thursday and Friday. Pretty exciting stuff. I would love to go over to Lexington, watch that, but I'm going to go do some other stuff. Love to have gone to Eldora today. This is Wednesday. I'm recording it. Thought about it. I really did. A lot of good late model dirt racing at Eldora this week. And Ohio Sprint Week starts in 2 days. Who's going? Who's going out there? Anybody? Waynesfield? Anyone go to Waynesfield? Want to meet up at Waynesfield or Atomic Speedway down in Chillicothe, Ohio? Come on. Anybody interested? No one's interested. We just want to listen to you. We don't want to have anything to do with you in real life. You are a crazy person. Next category as we wrap up, and this one's just pretty simple. Place differential that survives. I don't really need to highlight anybody on the screen. You get it. When you're building your optimal lineup, we've got dominators, we got challengers, we got finishers, and then we got the place differential drivers that just survive and luck out and mainly highlight, underscore, italicize, quotation marks, lucks out. I'll say that again. Highlight, bold, underscore, italicize, quotation marks, lucks out. Those are those place differential plays. Now, some are good, but most are lucky. Some are good, but most are either lucky and just wackiness happens, or they just benefit from circumstance, situations, or the fact that this is an Xfinity Series road course race. Anything can happen, and they luck out. Simple enough. And sometimes there's a pattern. We see typical cars like maybe a Jordan Anderson car or Sam Hunt racing car that is the guy to go with, or Josh Williams, who for whatever reason seems to be in a bazillion optimal lineups, just keeps popping up. Very under. We got to start putting some respect on Josh Williams' name. These guys, is he a great road course racer? I don't know, but he finishes these races. He just keeps finishing them. I guess enough solid finishes. Sure, he's got some bad ones. But then when he's good enough to be optimal. Boy, this Sage Karam play looks like a trap. Like, oh, Sage Karam's back in the series in a Gase mobile. Anyway, and then our last category, final and fifth category to finish the podcast, it is none other than Brandon Jones. He is in his own category. He has created his own category. We wish we could avoid Brandon Jones. It is inevitable that Brandon Jones will start in a place where he can score place differential points. Unavoidable, inevitable, tried and true. This has been a fact. It has been etched in stone. It is our fate, as the Mayans predicted. Brandon Jones will always qualify poorly and then firmly place a gun to your head and say, I dare you not to pick me. And also, go get a dryer at Menards. I do need a refrigerator. Save big money at Menards, or I'll blow your brains out. Brandon Jones is his own category. Brandon Jones, yes, you guessed it, will be participating in the ARCA West race at Sonoma. How many road course lower tier races has this guy participated in? He was in the ARCA Portland race, finished second actually. He'll be at Sonoma in an ARCA race. What, they didn't have any Trans Ams available this weekend for you? Jonesy guy has raced in so many road course races, and he never gets better. He has not aged like fine wine in Sonoma. He has just never done it. 42 road course races, not counting all those lead-up races that he does on those weekends. Absolutely brutal. It hurts. It's painful. Get used to it. Fifth and final category, Brandon Jones. Thanks for joining me. Like, subscribe, share, recruit people to this team, to this channel. You can be part of this team and other teams. You can listen to other podcasts as well. You don't have to self-identify as a R4TP. My pronouns are R4TP. No! Although I do appreciate it. I do love the comments, and I do love the support, and that some of you do rally around the tent and rally around the flagpole, the green checkered flagpole, and say, yeah, this is my side. That's fine. It's good. You know, you can be on this side and then also watch the other podcasts as well. But please recommend this podcast to other people. Share this podcast to other people. Share it on social media. Like, subscribe, share. RaceForThePrize.com. June package, $26. June and July, 52 buckaroos. PayPal.me. Venmo, Cash App. It's on the screen. It's in the description below. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the tips. I am truly blessed to have your support. I love you guys. Trip the Light, fantastic.